All right, guys, we have a PTR balance patch coming in here. Christmas came early, or hopefully Christmas is leaving early. So keep in mind, this is a PTR balance patch. This means that this is not currently in the game. This is on the public test realm, and it will be in the game most likely next week on Tuesday or Wednesday. Generally Wednesday. Now, if you guys have not ever seen my balance patch videos, what I like to do is I like to go through all of the balance changes and talk about how it's going to affect your Storm League games, how it's going to affect the competitive scene. There have been a few things that we've been asking for. We've been asking for balance for heroes like Lucio, Sonya, for Uther, for Hogger, Diva. There's been a few heroes that have just been dominant in the scene for so long, we've been looking for some changes. With that being said, this is a pretty intense balance patch. It's hit a lot of the roster, and there are some reworks. I'm going to go over the reworks in separate videos, and I really apologize that I have to do that, but I want to keep this video not 3.5 hours long. So I will try to get those videos out to you guys as soon as possible. Most likely I will have 2 of the reworks coming out today, and then I'll have 2 of the reworks coming out probably within the next couple days of the week. So let's get right into it, because I do want to keep this going relatively soon. So the reworks that we will have are Anduin, Joanna, Raynor, Stitches, Vala, and then we have hero changes, which we're going to go into. So out of these reworks, I'm just going to say I wasn't expecting these two. I thought Joanna and Anduin were in a great state. I didn't think that they needed to be changed at all. In fact, even Raynor I thought was in a perfect state. I didn't think any one of these 3 heroes needed reworks. If there were reworks coming out, I was expecting Probius, Nova, and a lot of other very low-played heroes in both Storm League and in the competitive scene. And so I really didn't want them to rework heroes that have really high popularity, because that means that people enjoy playing those heroes, and I don't personally think that they need a rework. I'm very concerned about this rework just because I play a lot of Joanna, and I think that she has a ton of build paths. But with all of that being said, I will save my skepticism for when I go over these reworks in the later areas. So let's go into the heroes. May has been the highest win rate tank in Hero League or Storm League. It's a morning for me. And so they are just lowering some of her stats. Her health is a pretty small nerf. Health regen nerf, again, a very small nerf. Ice Storm periodic damage is being reduced by a decent amount, but again, relatively small. Heat transfer, the healing being reduced by a small but still going to be pretty decent. Cold Front, this one I think is bigger than people are making it out to be, and Ice Wall cooldown is being increased to 60. Still think it's a solid cooldown. So overall, I think these are pretty good changes. It might lower her win rate by like 1% or 2, but overall, it's not going to be a huge deal for May in either scene, really. Diva, a pretty light health nerf, but she did need it. Now, this nerf right here and this nerf right here, if you combine these two, this is actually significant, because with both of these two changes, it makes it to where you can't just stand still on a bruiser camp at level 2 and just take the bruiser camp. And so you may need to move around a little bit. You may need to grab a fountain ahead of time. And this is actually a surprisingly significant change, even though it seems kind of small. Liquid Cooling does increase the bonus of this. So what they're doing with Diva is they're going to nerf her base stats a little bit, nerf her popular build a little bit, and then they're going to buff her underutilized talents. So we're seeing like rushdowns, damage to non-heroics being reduced. We're seeing the healing reduction, the healing, reduced healing received increased, which is pretty cool. So larger, basically W build's getting a big buff, while Q build's getting like slight nerfs along the way. And I think that those are some pretty good adjustments, but I don't know if those are I think they're good adjustments. I'll just say that. So I don't think this is going to affect where she sits in the competitive scene. It may nerf her a teeny bit, but it's not going to change too much. And I think that it's a pretty unique adjustment because we might be seeing more W build come out, kind of a pseudo Leoric. Hogger. Hogger's been absolutely dominant, and the people that are great at Hogger have been kind of seeing um, huge win rates on maps like Infernal Shrines. Now, they've done a few things to Hogger, which I agree and disagree. I feel like if they are going to do these changes, they need to do these changes with buffs in other areas, because what's keeping Hogger afloat right now after the first set of nerfs is his E builds and the ways that his E is being used. Well, they're reducing the radius, which is going to be pretty big. I know it seems like a small change, but that's going to be pretty big. They are increasing the damage of it. Then they are reducing the rage damage of it, which pros and cons about that. It's going to make Hogger easier to just press E and do damage, but it's going to make him less valuable if you knew how to do that, because instead of it doing 32 damage, good Hogger players would have that doubled. And so you'd be at 60. Now, with a 50% increase, it kind of puts you similarly to where you were, because you were be at 64, and now you're going to be at... actually, that's actually higher, isn't it? 50% increase of 44 should be 60. Man, why is it so early? I can't even do basic math right now. Should be 66, right? 66. The 64 goes up to 66. That's just an overall buff. I mean, the radius is being decreased, so this is fine. As long as you're doing the rage correctly, it's still fine. And then the damage bonus from rage now only applies to heroic targets. Oh, okay. So it is better against heroes in both scenarios, whether you have rage or you don't. But then against non-heroes, which the only time this is really relevant is like BOE, because it's a little difficult to get rage before you're doing it on like a camp. But either way, this is pretty decent, actually. Is this a buff? I don't know. I mean, other than the radius decrease, which is of course going to make it difficult for specific camps, on the Prowl. So he's going to also have the same thing. Underutilized talents are going to see buffs. I don't think that a lot of these are going to be... or sorry, this is a nerf. This is not an underutilized talent. Ever since they nerfed the trait talents, this one's been used. Loot Horde is getting a little bit of a buff. The damage bonus has been increased. The range has been increased. And it's also going to increase its damage by 50%. Aggro range, the range bonus is being decreased. So again, they're nerfing the E radius. So it's going to be harder to kind of steal objectives with BOE. And it's going to be less valuable on specific camps that are a little bit more spread out, like bosses, for example. And it's also going to be weaker on... in just team fights. Pummel, spell power reduction, they're keeping the value, they're reducing the duration, which I think is the best way to answer it, so that you only really get the duration while you're using E, and then just a small amount afterwards. No control, duration decay rate is increased. I mean, this is enough to basically kill no control if we're also combining it with... I mean, again, this is a buff and damage, but... and the radius is being decreased. So I think overall, this is a pretty significant change where you might want to switch over to that rage talent level 20. All right. Into Sonya. The biggest thing that I think they needed to do with this was reduce the percent down from 1.5 to 1.25. They instead decided that they were going to go with the healing side and reduce the healing. And I think that's a pretty significant change too, because the only reason that she's so scary is that at 16, she's really hard to kill and does a ridiculous amount of damage. Now, if you want to be really hard to kill, you have to go spin build. And if you want the damage, you have to go W build. And I actually prefer this balance change to it than my own balance change, because now you have a solid direction of where you want to go. Damage or survivability. My only concern, or not really concern, but question is, I wonder if we'll see a hybrid spin W build. Because you would still have the damage from W, and then you can spin for survivability depending on what you need. The downside is that you are going to be losing the range W talents, but usually you're just trying to kill the target in the front line, and you don't really care so much about anything after that. But yeah, they're also reducing the damage bonus of Furious Blow at 1 from 50 to 40. Shattered Ground, they're changing the functionality, so it no longer is going to be doing that backline shenanigans, but they changed the functionality. Increased seismic slams splash damage by 250%. Targeting a hero with Seismic Slam further increases its splash damage by 250%, while targeting other enemies instead increases the length of Seismic Slam. Oh, so if you hit a hero, it doesn't go as far, but it does way more damage to what's behind it. If you hit something other than a hero, it goes really far, but it doesn't do that bonus damage. That's a unique change. I think it's interesting. You're really only going to be able to hit frontline with this, and with the reduced healing, I mean, this is a significant nerf to the survivability of W build, where the damage is still kind of there. So I think this is good enough to take her down a couple pegs in W build. The Lost Vikings has been dominant in the highest levels of play, so they are doing light nerfs to the overall Vikings, but then what they are going to be doing is they are going to be buffing underutilized talents like its Sabotage, Norse Force, Longboat Raid, and I actually really like these buffs. I think that they're pretty significant, and it does kind of add a different playstyle to what's already in there, and for those that are not great at Vikings, it actually adds a little bit of an easier playstyle. Norse Force can allow you to just kind of keep all your Vikings together, give them big shields, and just jump in, where Longboat Raid is also another one where you keep your Vikings together. So it allows people to kind of just split soaks safely and then group them all together and just be kind of a safe almost tank into have decent damage ults. I think it's okay. I think these are okay changes. So overall, this might see more Vikings in things like Storm League, but it won't change too much in the highest levels of competitive for Vikings. Maybe reduce it a little bit on the maps that he was good on. Lucio has been a dominant force in the current meta, and I would say that Lucio, once he got his high five changes, he's been pretty first ban, first pick material in competitive. And even outside of competitive, he's been very annoying as it's kind of reduced the tank's playability because whatever the tank tries to go on, it's just going to get immediately cleansed. And since it's such a low cooldown cleanse, what I wanted to do with this was just make the cooldown, the individual cooldown of high five be harsher, or make it to where Lucio doesn't heal himself. That way he can't just full heal himself by going around his team. But yeah, so party mix. New functionality. This is the one that when you finish the quest, you got an increase in range. Still does that, but now it also is going to increase your mana by 2% every minute that it's played. 8 minutes of play time, which is total, which means if you're near 4 people, it gets dropped down very quickly. We'll give you 16% more mana. I don't think this is going to change this talent very much. If I went this build, I rarely run out of mana, but whatever. Couple mana talents, level 1 never hurts. Boombox, cast range is being increased by 100%. Health has been increased, and additional functionality, allies affected by Boombox gain 5 armor. That's really cool. That's really good. How much is that going to change anything? I don't really know, but 100% more range is going to be a lot easier to check bushes with. So I think Boombox will overtake the other 2 talents of the competitive scene. But I don't think this will affect anything outside of competitive unless you're going to have like a Sergeant Hammer in the back line, you're going to heal the front line, you want to just heal them both. I5, the self-heal is being nerfed. I think the self-heal could be legitimately removed and this talent would still be balanced. Slip armor is being reduced up to 11. New functionality, increase the duration of Amp It Up by 1. While Amp It Up is active, enemy heroes hit with Soundwave or Push Off increase its duration by 3 seconds. Sorry, by 0.3 seconds. Again, doesn't really compete, but I think that's moving it in the right direction. Mixing Fire, the damage is being reduced. The cost and cooldown reduction is being reduced, which means that it's going to increase it. I wish they wouldn't do double negatives. I wish they would just say what the percentages, show what the percentages are, and then scratch it out and have that. But it still would be a double negative, I guess. But yeah, so this is a pretty big nerf to level 20. I think this helps, but I think Lucio's still going to need some nerfs to kind of bring him back to where he needs to be. Uther, his self armor is being reduced, and they're kind of correcting some of the talents to compensate for that. But this whole nerf was basically there to nerf the early game main tank Uther, and it doesn't really buff or nerf anything else. It kind of buffs your W talent at 16, but that doesn't make it competitive to Benediction. And same with this Q talent. This gets pretty close, but it doesn't really make it competitive to Benediction. Azmodan is getting some really weird changes. So the biggest thing they needed to do with Azmodan was nerf his E-build, because once people started really getting the hang of E-build and learning about what it does, its win rate jumped him from somewhere around like 49% to like 56% in Storm League, where we haven't seen a lot of it in competitive, just because it's easy to interrupt and it's easy to deal with when you're actually in comms. But outside of comms, it's just pure chaos and hard to deal with. So what they've done is they've buffed the Q build in the late game, and they've nerfed the E build in the late game. So the E build was pretty strong in the early game, but it was really strong in the late game, where the Q build was not really strong in the early game, and it kind of wasn't strong in the late game either. So now the Q is going to scale much better, not just with the stacks that you have, but also on its baseline scaling, both of which are going to really help out your Qs kind of chunk people in the late game. You need to remember that that level 10 can increase the damage your Q does. So this is pretty good. We may be seeing Azmodan's Q start chunking in the late game again. We've also seen that they're changing it to where, like, Gluttony is going to make it to where you earn more stacks with your Q, so you ramp up a little bit faster. And they're nerfing Demonic Invasion. They're nerfing Hell Rift. So this will change what we see with Azmodan. We may start seeing a few Q-build Azmodans come back into the meta, especially in low ranks. So low ranks that are seeing Azmodan, just know that Azmodan's going to start chunking a lot more in the late game with his orbs, or his globes, whatever you want to call it. And then in the high rank, I don't expect to see too much Azmodan in Q build, but the Azmodan E build has gotten turned down just a little bit. It's still going to be strong. But yeah, that late game Q build Azmodan is going to chunk a little bit more than it used to. I think it could be potentially double the damage that it was before, where a late game Azmodan would hit for about 25 to 30% of people's health. I'd imagine that like Assassin's gonna get half health by Azmodan with his in the level 20 range, which is interesting. Valstad W build is getting slightly adjusted. So they're making it to where your lightning rod is going to verify its target more often, which is great, because there's a lot of times where you would get out of his radius and then he would like wait for a second and then dash back in and still get those procs. Now it's going to verify so much faster. So if you leave that radius, you're probably safe. This also gives some things to heroes that might temporarily leave the radius, like Artanis, who could swap out and then swap back in. Or people that have just like dashes that might slow them down a little bit after they get there, like a Nubarok, who would dash out, but then he kind of has to stand still for a second when he locks target. So this is pretty good for people, because Valstad also needed a nerf. W build was absolutely dominant. Level 1, Gathering Storm. Hammering does bonus per... the bonus per stack is being doubled. That's actually pretty decent. I don't know if that brings it to the competitive level yet, but it sure makes it competitive comparatively to these talents. The W, Lightning Rod's cooldown reduction is being reduced. Lightning Rod's damage bonus per stack is being reduced. Change functionality, takedowns resetting Lightning's cooldown now gained on quest completion. So this build's basically ruined, because this quest is actually surprisingly hard to get, especially in the early game before you have the talents that allow you to get multiple strikes, and you can only stack it in team fights. So this is a huge nerf to W build, to the point that I don't know. I think it's still going to be an easy build to get value out of, but it's no longer going to be the meta build. Thunderstrike's damage bonus per stack is being increased. Change functionality. Thunderstrike's damage bonus no longer affects other lightning rod bonuses. Strike's damage bonus no longer affects other lightning rod. Oh, like the other bonuses. So what I feel like this is saying is that it doesn't affect other talents, but they're saying it only because of the bonuses. Let's read. Last change shocked people. And they've also fixed the bugs. So with the bugs being fixed and with this talent being like just gutted, I would imagine that, again, it's going to be an easy build to play. So we'll still see it in Storm League. But in the competitive scene, we didn't see it in the competitive scene because of the bug. It was banned. But even now, I think that it'd be pretty rare to see it in the competitive scene. I'm going to need to double check this talent, what it means. Honestly, I could go through the build and see what other bonuses they might be talking about, but my concern is, like, it doesn't make any sense for the way that it's worded. So this is a bonus, but it doesn't seem like it would make sense for the extra strikes to forget this, because this buffs both those strikes. This isn't a bonus, but I feel like this is what they're talking about. Increase the number of strikes by 2. Oh, so does it mean the bonus strikes where it does 20% more damage for each It doesn't make any sense, because these talents were like meant for each other. I don't know. I'll have to test it out in try mode and get back to you guys. Junkrat, Q build is being buffed, which is crazy to me because I only play Q build. And some steel trap changes are being buffed. And they're not nerfing his W build, which is still being a solid build and competitive. Not only is it a solid build on its own, it's one of the best builds to counter people like Medivh, where enemies have to position in a specific way to get value from them, and you can simply just knock them away from those turrets. But this is some pretty significant changes to his Q build, which makes me wonder if that's going to get some extra value. And Rocket Ride's also getting a little bit of a buff. I don't know. I think these are good for Storm League, and I think it's going to be very strong for competitive. Shockray, the channel time is being reduced. That means you can cast your Q faster. His level 4 change functionality, he gains 10% more movement speed, and then casting it, he gets 30%. You don't need to hit anything in particular. You don't need to hit anything to get these bonuses. Beam alignment, mana cost is being reduced. Mana cost reduction is being increased, so makes your mana cost be reduced. Additional functionality, while Resonance Beam is fully charged, Shockray's slow duration is being increased, which also still lowers your cooldown of your Q, right? Or am I misremembering this? Range Assassin, where's Tassadar? Talents. This was a 7 talent. Beam Alignment reduces the mana cost while it's fully charged. Beam Alignment, mana cost reduction is being increased. Additional functionality while it's fully charged. I think they mean this one. Beam Alignment. So I'm on the PTR currently. So this isn't updated. Because I'm currently logged into the PTR. Oh, I'm not logged into the PTR. Never mind. They're adding this onto it. So, cool, I guess. It's better for that. Their reasoning is they just said that it's been underperforming at higher levels of play, which it is, because we finally learned to start dodging Q, and we've also learned to start punishing him when he stands still for Q. So people have been going with like faster builds that you don't need to be standing still as long. We've been going to like the original build I was telling people, which was the W black hole build. So those are the heroes. So just to give you guys an overview of what has been happening. Also, we're talking about bug fixes. Added Warhead Junction into ranked play. Removed Volskaya from ranked play. Very surprised at both of those. Warhead Junction, we haven't had a lot of testing to see how good this is. With the new changes with those. Just so you guys know, I will probably be doing a video on Warhead Junction just so we can get some practice in explaining what this map should be doing and what you should be doing on this map. But quick overview, people that are really good in small fights that can do a lot in skirmishes are going to have a lot of success on this map, because there are a lot of times where it's just you versus one other person trying to grab the point. So heroes that are great at like one-on-ones and isolation are great. And people who have the ability to 100 to 0 someone on their own are also great. So like Jaina, level 16 Jaina is really solid. But globals are really good in this map too, because even if you can't take your own point, you can join someone who's been stalling a point. So stall, globals, and one-on-ones are great on this map. Keep in mind, you still want a standard team comp, because there are bosses that you could fight over, and there are some objectives that get fought over. Generally, I recommend using the bombs where there's more structures, but at the same time, this is a relatively big map, and just getting catapults out would be great. So using all of your bombs to open up one lane would be perfect. The bombs no longer do increased damage on the center, so feel free to just get the bombs out there. Yeah, Cool. Volskaya, I liked Volskaya, so I mean I'm sad that it's gone, but that's what happens in ranked rotation, so whatever. And then there's some bugs. They fixed Crowd Surfer, they fixed Misha Charge and Deliverance. None of these were bugs I had even known about. But okay. So, just to recap on the heroes, we have Junkrat will likely see more play in Storm League and more play in competitive. I think these are good changes. His hybrid build that I would recommend earlier is probably the build that I think got the largest buff out of all the builds, with the exception of probably Rocket Ride, which I know like CPX swears by, but I don't know. Then we get into Valstad. I think Valstad will still be good in competitive. I think Q build I'm on the fence about, and I'd like to see it in action a little bit more. Where potentially on maps like Braxis, where you just get a stack all day, I think might be good. W build I think has been gutted. It's still going to be great in Storm League, but I think that in competitive we're going to see the auto attack build like shine just a little bit more. Still unsure about what this means. I'll have to double check it. Lightning Rod. I mean, it's just a nerf for W build in general. Q build for Azmodan is back on the menu, especially in the lower levels of Storm League. And in competitive, I still don't expect to see a lot of Azmodan in competitive. Then E build got toned down a little bit, but it's still gonna be strong if you enjoyed playing it. Uther, main tank Uther, just light nerfs. If you were bold enough to take main tank Uther into a game, you're probably still bold enough to take main tank Uther into a game. It'd probably still be being used in the same areas. I mean, less armor is definitely going to make a big difference in competitive because he can get punished a lot more. And this will also bring down his value, bringing main tank Uther into Storm League. But generally, if you're going to be bringing a double healer into Storm League, you're probably going to have a higher win rate. And the rest of these changes are pretty negligible. Lucio, I think he's going to need to get more nerfs after this. I think in Storm League, these are pretty decent changes, but in competitive, he's going to need more nerfs than this. Lost Vikings, I think he's more approachable, and I think he's nerfed where people had done the best with him, but I think he's still perfectly fine to be used in both competitive and Storm League. He just might be a little bit more approachable. Sonya, I think this is a really good change. It's better than the change that I was thinking. So I think this will definitely bring her down in survivability. In W build, she's going to do a lot of damage like she's currently doing, but she's actually so much more riskier to do that damage. So I would say just attack Sonya if she's in W build, and if she's in spin build, just ignore her. This will bring her down a little bit in the highest levels of competitive, but I still think she's going to be a great hero for Storm League. Hogger, these are all pretty incredible changes. I think that this will not affect him as much as people are probably going to expect, but I do think this will probably bring him down a little bit in the levels of competitive, but not as much as people think. It definitely nerfs, specifically in the radius area, which will affect like how he gets camps and how he does on like Infernal Shrines. But for the most part, I think that he's still pretty decent. And can still be used pretty well. Diva, the great changes in my opinion. Slight nerfs to where she was really strong, and pretty decent buffs to where it might give her some talent changes. So Diva, same place in competitive, same place in Storm League, and that's a good change. May light nerf on her win rate in Storm League, but I think she'll still be used in both Storm League and competitive where she was. And this is where we get into the reworks, and I will do my best to get out some of these reworks as soon as possible. So my overall thoughts about this, I am unsure. And I know that's not the great way to say it. I think that they did touch all the heroes that they needed to touch, or at least a good amount of them. So I think that's pretty good. But I am concerned about these reworks, so we'll get into those reworks. I'll try to get those videos out to you as soon as possible. But I'm at least glad we got a patch. I hope that it's not going to be 10 weeks in between each patch. I would have liked them to do these balance patch changes 4 to 6 weeks ago, and then just kept the the other stuff on the back burner, right? Like the reworks and stuff. Keep that on the back burner until it's done, but at least update the game. Because that Sonya change is a pretty good change. So if they could have had that out a while back, we wouldn't have seen such a stale meta for so long. But with all of that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. I would say these were good balance patch changes. We'll get into the reworks and kind of see what goes from there. But overall, pretty good balance patch changes. So thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to check out all the videos. And again, this week is going to be jam-packed with reworks, as well as I do have a couple other kind of fun videos planned. Well, I mean, fun for me. I don't know if they're going to be fun for you guys, but I'm going to have some other videos planned for like I had mentioned, like early, mid-game, late-game stuff. So with all that being said, thank you guys, and I don't know, subscribe, all that stuff. You guys figure that out.